everyone. Is this one going? Kia ora, we're about to start. Thank you, Huhana. Okay, we're just starting this session on Young Minds Putting Sustainability into Practice with a 2-minute presentation about action outcomes from the Masters of the Sustainable Development Goals from students involved in that. And a few of them will be speaking on this panel, so it's sort of a way of introducing them as well. So we'll do this and then we'll move on to our first talk. New Zealand is a place of boundless natural beauty, but even here, there is an urgent need to face sustainability challenges. From climate change to more frequent disasters, food waste, polluted rivers and inadequate transport systems, we need action now. In 2020 at Massey University, we launched a cross-disciplinary Master of Sustainable Development Goals to help students gain skills, knowledge and systems thinking so they could effectively transfer theory and research into practical solutions. Instead of doing a thesis, each student completes a semester-long practicum. They partner with a real-world business, government or community organisation where they bring fresh insights and practical skills to drive sustainability. Whether it means supporting regenerative agriculture,
the practicum helped me put classroom theory into real-life action.
Ensuring sustainability in the fresh produce industry,
I've turned my learnings into actions that are now being felt around the globe.
doing food rescue and sharing it with those in need,
The practicum makes sustainability feel real and urgent.
providing active transport solutions, or decarbonising public transport.
My practicum led to a great job where I can contribute to New Zealand's climate resilience.
Advancing renewable energy,
I was able to roll up my sleeves and apply what I'd learned, and it was so rewarding.
or cleaning up our river systems. These students are translating the SDGs into action, one project, one community, one solution at a time. For our partners, the results are tangible.
She brought ideas into Food HQ that will leave a lasting legacy.
For our students, the learning is transformational.
I learnt the importance of a grassroots approach to sustainability. This is what climate action looks like.
Together, our students and their partners are building a more just and sustainable world. This is more than study, it's impact. Yeah, it's not quite Jason Momoa and Chief of War, which is amazing and a great series at the moment, but we're really proud of the work that many of our students have been doing, and a lot of the volunteers are also part of that program, and we hope they'll be putting ideas into action in future as well, following on from the lovely keynote from Nikki previously. So I'm very pleased to introduce our first speaker in this session. So we've got 5 speakers who are going to just share with us something they're doing through their mahi, through their work to put sustainability into practice. And first up we have Lewis Gibson, who's from Auckland Transport.
Tēnā koutou katoa, ko ahumairangi te maunga, ko te whanganui atara te moana, ko Ngāti Pākehā me Ngāti Hamoa ngā iwi, ko Lewis Gibson ahau, ngā mihi nui kia koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa. So my name's Lewis Gibson. I'm here to share a bit about how I put sustainability into practice, and I thought the best way to do so would be to share a little bit about how and why I got into sustainability and some of the mahi that I undertake today. So I'm the Senior Sustainability Advisor at Auckland Transport. At AT, our role is to contribute to an effective, efficient and safe Auckland land transport system in the public interest. I sit within the Climate Transition team, which is under the Science and Sustainability Group, and my role in the work of my team is largely to enact system change so that we're a climate resilient agency and so that we're contributing to Auckland's wider climate transition. This all sounds very exciting, right? I certainly thought it would be before I started this job. So how did I get there? Well, I previously worked in the world of international education. My job was to promote New Zealand as a study destination, And for 5 years, I lived and worked in Washington, DC as an offshore New Zealand public servant. In many ways, this was a glamorous job. It was conferences, high-level delegations, networking, and even lobbying with US senatorial and congressional officers on Capitol Hill. Our job was to bring in more North American students to New Zealand and build new academic partnerships to get New Zealand students offshore. I led diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives, and this was fascinating, and that allowed me to work with Māori educators and students, as well as Native American and African American educators and students. In the process, I heard and saw repeatedly how the decisions of the past were affecting or disaffecting the innocent today. I saw that deep historical injustices meant that Indigenous and other minority students had significantly less pathways and access to higher education through no fault of their own. And I could see the flow-on effects of those historical injustices, not just socially, but economically and environmentally as well. In some small way, I was able to contribute to building new opportunities for these students, and the work was meaningful and impactful, and it was from this that my interest in sustainability grew. And so I wanted to do more, and so I studied a Masters of Sustainable Development Goals with Massey University, and I explored the grand ideas of the SDGs and was inspired by the grand ambition for change. I was ready to enter the professional world of sustainability and start to bring about some of that systemic change for good. And I'm now lucky enough to say that I work in a job where it is all about trying to affect that change. So, what does that systemic change look like? It is decidedly unglamorous. It is a world of spreadsheets, it's reports, it's disclosures, it's metrics, it's risks, it's carbon accounting and lunch and learns. It's about affecting policy change through updated templates, procurement contract clauses, and while it's not as earth-shattering as I was maybe expecting, it is still very important. At AT, we focus on our systemic change by trying to change our internal behaviours and trying to influence external behavioural change. But like anything that involves changing, as we've learnt this morning, changing how people behave or think requires pragmatism and persistence, toughness and humility. And in the current political environment, talking about sustainability from a moral or ethical point of view doesn't fly. And so we changed the language. Instead of talking about climate mitigation, we talk about risk mitigation. Instead of emissions reduction, we talk about energy efficiency and cost savings. Instead of trying to convince people that fossil fuels are bad, we talk about supply chain vulnerabilities and fuel and energy efficiencies and energy security. Instead of talking about empowering women and underrepresented communities, we talk about economic resilience through supply diversity. And for everything that we do, we back it up with data. The work of my team is to try and ensure that sustainability becomes a core part of others' work. And luckily, we have regulations that force our colleagues to have to think about these things through the Aotearoa New Zealand climate standards. So for those who are not familiar with this, it's a climate-related financial disclosure reporting regime. And under this regime, specific entities have to disclose their climate-related risks, opportunities, governance, strategies, metrics, and targets. It's basically a tool for us to shoehorn climate, and by extension sustainability, into everything that we do at AT. It gives us a mandate to regularly report on climate to board and executives, and because we have that mandate, we can get access to financial data, and we can use that data to demonstrate that emissions reductions leads to cost savings. It also allows us to involve ourselves in procurements, so we can introduce mandatory sustainability weightings and sustainability contract clauses. This allows us to use our significant influence as a big spender to try and influence and upskill the industries and the businesses that we work with. So for example, we require 100% of our contractors to use non-potable water in construction. We require our contractors to set a baseline for their waste and demonstrate that they're diverting 75% of that waste from landfill. We require them to share their actual fuel and energy use and share their emissions reductions targets with us. And they must have their own supplier diversity targets. In this way, we're able to bring about real-world sustainable outcomes. So these are two really cool examples of this. On the far left, that's low carbon concrete being used in construction. And on the right-hand side, that's an example of an electric bus. The electrification of Auckland's bus fleet is a huge piece of work. And in the last financial year, we decreased diesel use by over 1 million litres in 1 year alone. That's the emissions equivalent of powering over 3,000 houses in New Zealand for 1 year. And we expect to have 100% electric bus fleet by 2035, which is really exciting. I'd love to say I'm responsible, but I'm not. But for us at AT, not only is it all about this big external stuff, it's all about internal systemic change. So we spend a significant amount of time analysing our operations and finding the documents, the policies, the templates that are used by staff right across the organisation and updating those. So for example, a project manager may not care about emissions, but if that project manager is required to report on the actual emissions of their project at various stages throughout the project lifecycle, then they'll do so regardless of whether they believe in climate change. Working in sustainability is not exactly how I thought it would be. I thought it might have a bit more oomph. I came from a job where you kind of had instant gratification if you're handing a scholarship to a student. And now the work that I'm doing will take years to realise. And also, perhaps unsurprisingly, I can count the number of times the SDGs have been mentioned in my work on one hand. Part of me is content with the change that we're making at AT because it is change and it is happening. We're starting to decarbonise our operations and starting to influence others, but the key words there are starting to. And I can't help but feel, as a new professional, that this is the type of work that AT should have been doing 30 years ago. As a new professional, I'm caught between this tension of wanting to be proud and happy with the progress that we're making, but also the knowledge that it's not enough. And with 2030 and the end of the SDGs right around the corner, the big question on my mind is how do we turn this trickle of system change into an avalanche? And I'm afraid I don't have the answers, but I'm hoping that over the next 2 days, some of the conversations we'll have will illuminate the way. With that, ngā mihi nui kia koutou.
Thanks so much, Lewis. That was great. Please put any questions on the app. We're not sure if there will be time in this session for the questions to actually be asked of the speakers during it, but we will be trying to, we'll try to do that if we can, but otherwise they'll respond after the session, or you can have a chat to them over the lunch break. Okay, next up we have Montana Lamb from the Waiheke Resources Trust. Please give a warm welcome.
Kia ora koutou, ko Montana tōku ingoa. Very excited to be here. Just wanted to give a big thanks to Glenn and Regina for the opportunity. I had a wonderful time on the Masters of Sustainable Development Goals with a specialisation in climate action. After shuffling around my specialisation for a long time, like Sam noticeable about that. Just wanted to do it all. Not possible. So focused on climate action. And just to refresh your brains around SDG 13 climate action, improving education, awareness raising and human and institutional capacity on climate change mitigation, adaptation, impact reduction and early warning. And so I did my practicum and worked at the Waiheke Resources Trust as the Zero Waste Manager. So a little island off the Horeke Gulf near Tamaki Makaurau. And so I was responsible for waste diversion projects while I was there at WRT. So looking after both inedible and edible food waste from entering the landfill. Waiheke Island, as many of you may know, is a geographically isolated island. So a lot of that waste would be shipped off out of sight, out of mind for a lot of people. So it was trying to instill that behaviour change for a lot of people on the island in terms of this is actually, it's going somewhere and it's going into landfill and that's the impact of what you're having, and trying to get them to confront that in a way that isn't so scary, but it's a way that can provide action and that change to a circular system. Cool. So in my role, it was very much on the ground, community-led climate action, which was really cool. I had a lot of experience in terms of strategy and reporting building, and being able to be on the ground was a really cool way to see actually what was possible for this community. We had a lot of people who were within like the retirement demographic, a lot of visitors to the island as well, who came from overseas, and so it was providing a space that was accessible and in a way that they could understand, both with words but with also action that they could do with their hands. And so talking about inedible food, we held composting workshops and Live Food Hate Waste workshops to build that resilience around here's the food that is accessible to you, whether that be through food that our team rescued or whether that was food that was accessible at that time at the supermarkets for a discounted rate. And so one of the projects I looked after was the Kai Conscious project, and so there were two factors to that. Our Kai Conscious Cafe, which was held every Friday at the Waiheke Sustainability Centre. And so we had a rescue team that would go out 6 days of the week, and they would rescue food from supermarkets and hospitality on the island that would otherwise have been sent to landfill, and it was still edible and safe to eat. And so we had a team that was very dedicated, and they'd go around the island, rescue that food, and they'd redistribute it to 30 families that were in need on the island through food packagings with our partnership with Living Waters, and then they would take it back to the Sustainability Centre where we had a community fridge and pantry, and so we would stock that fridge at different times of the day, and people were able to come and grab the food that they needed. And it was giving that empowerment back to people who perhaps couldn't afford food, that there was the space where they could enter and feel welcomed, and it was something that was accessible to all, which is very much aligned with the SDGs. And so our rescue team would go out to about 15 hospitality businesses on the island, and then bring all that food back and redistribute it. Cool. So also aligning with the SDGs, it was super important for us that we reiterated that no one be left behind. We had cases where people were finding issues with who was accessing that food, but it was very important to us to instill in our values that this food was for everyone, and we're not there to judge people's backgrounds. We don't pry into people's lives of why they're there, why they need that. It's providing a space that gives them the opportunity to participate in reducing that food sent to landfill. And we've had instances where in the two photos on the side, one of the 4 squares had a massive power outage overnight, and so our team were called on in the morning to go and rescue all that food because none of it they could sell. The freezer had just completely lost power, and they were just going to bin everything. And so we gathered up the team, and we took the vans that we had and went and rescued all the food in boxes that we could find. And we have the Sustainability Centre where we could set up a little kind of supermarket where we had bags, and people were able to come and grab that food and take it back to their households and their families. So being able to do stuff within climate resilience is very, very important. Being able to offer that space that is, again, accessible and is open to all is super, super important. We have now hit 250 tonnes of food rescue since 2018, which is very, very exciting. And with the on-the-ground approach that we have, it's important that it is a bottom-up in terms of those relationships that we hold with our food rescue partners, such as Woolworths and Foursquare, that we're educating their staff as well that may have a high turnover of the importance of them supporting us with whether it's the inedible food that may go to composting or it's the edible food that then comes back to the people in the community that need it. And so coming back to the Kai Conscious Friday lunch, we put on every week. We've now fed over 10,000 people. We encourage volunteers to come between 10 and 11 a.m. And they come every week, which is incredible to see that they will come, they will learn how to cook. Some people know how to cook and they teach other people, and they provide that space for learning and for that cross-collaborative and shared knowledge. Whether it's people who come from overseas and they find us our sustainability hub and they see what's happening and they can then support that, and then at 1 o'clock have a lunch with the whole community, which is super special. It creates that space for shared knowledge and for just community growth and for that specialisation to be shared, because it's shifting away from a siloed approach to sustainability, which is again super important for the SDGs to be achieved. We're just having that space where we can share knowledge, and it's just super special to be able to do that, and to be able to instill that circular space as well, especially for a geographically isolated island. So where to from here? Just a few of my learnings from when I did the practicum, as well as just observations from when I was in my role. Being able to target different areas of the food industry, so looking at ways that we're able to target funding, but also understanding how we're getting this excess of food and how we're instilling that food is rescued and we're able to then redirect it to people in need so that it's not ending up in the landfill and creating emissions for our environment. And also being able to keep up those relationships that we have with people that fund us and support us and maintain the work that we have. It's been a really tricky time for funding at the moment, and this environment has been pretty difficult to navigate, and this is all stuff that's super important. And then it's being able to get volunteers to help provide like a service that we can for the community. It's being able to show how important that is for funders as well. And in order to shift the behaviour, it's shifting the terminology. So for these communities who are needing to access this food, it's trying to shift away from the word waste, like, oh, here's food waste. It's still food and it's still edible, and it's good, nutritious food that may otherwise not be accessible financially or environmentally as well. Kia ora.
Thanks so much, Montana. Really interesting that both you and Lewis were speaking about the language we use, and sometimes we've got to reframe things in terms of ensuring we still get government funding, and other times, but we can still continue with the passion for change that we want in a particular space. I'm very pleased to now welcome Jacob Laws, who's from the AgriChain Centre, and he'll be sharing with you some of his experiences.
Hello. So as introduced by Regina, my name is Jacob Laws, and today I'm going to be talking about walking the talk and actually looking at how do you actually prove sustainability and measure sustainability. So who am I? Well, I'm Ngāi Taranaki, Ngāi Tahu, and affiliated with Ngāti Whātua Ōrākei. I'm the projects manager for the company called the AgriChain Centre, who works in agribusiness consultancy. I'm also the technical advisory group projects manager for a group called United Fresh, who is the pan-produce industry body in New Zealand, covering everyone from the growers to the wholesalers, the logistics providers, through to the retailers and supermarkets. I've also, for my sins, now become the New Zealand representative on the Sustainability Committee for the International Federation of Produce Standards. So I now represent New Zealand on the global stage when it comes to sustainability and fresh produce. And I'm a manager of a publication for the data of a publication called Fresh Facts, which is an industry publication looking at the fresh produce industry in New Zealand and the facts and figures and data around it. And over the last few years, I've recently finished a Masters of Sustainable Development Goals at Massey University with Regina and Samantha and Glenn, and mine focus was on data and governance and how do you actually prove sustainability. So this is not a new topic for me. I've been working on sustainability for about a decade now across a lot of projects. So you'll see here previous projects I've worked for MFAT on sustainable cocoa production in the Samoa. I've worked with MFAT and MPI in Tonga on an agricultural diagnostic looking at the health of the food supply chain in Tonga. I've looked at with MFE on the National Policy Statement for Freshwater Management, looking at runoff pollution of nutrients from crop growing. And then I've also worked on sustainable consumption supply chains, looking with MPI, supply chain resilience in disasters such as COVID, as well as supply chain reviews for significant national retailers, looking at how they optimise their supply chains to ensure that after events such as Cyclone Gabrielle, they can ensure that their food will continue to go from the grower to pack houses and then into the supermarkets without being lost in the supply chain due to timing. So we all here know the SDGs, this whole conference about the SDGs, and we probably also know some of the other topics that it's been previously called: ESG, CSR, the 3 Ps, People, Planet, Profit, and a variety of other names. And it's delivered in a variety of different ways, but here's just one particular way of how you can sort of sort the SDGs into the old framework or the other framework of ESGs. And you can see they all match, they all just align in slightly different ways. It's just different ways of looking at the data and what you do. But the first thing to realise when you're actually looking at sustainability is a lot of it is talk, and the talk is big, easy and cheap. You'll see it in documents published frequently, PR articles, your company announcements, CEO or general manager statements, sustainability commitments, letters from the chair. Some of you may have read these, some of you may have helped write these, but where's the proof in these statements? So here we have a selection of annual reports which we've actually collected from our industry over the last year. So all of these are from 2024, 2025, and you'll see sustainable, 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 but you're not seeing any proof. So our observations over the last decade is that the talk is more common than the action. And we've found a variety of reasons for this. There's misunderstandings about the extent of what sustainability is or what sustainability requires. There's an overly narrow focus on limited criteria aspects, people assuming that just because they're doing carbon zero, that's enough. We're seeing stuff related to goals or targets without SMART, they're not specific, they're not measurable, they're not achievable, they're not realistic, and they're not time-bound. People are setting goals that they can't achieve or can't prove they've achieved. Then we're also seeing a lot of reliance on laws or regulations. People are saying, well, if the government or the regulator isn't requiring it, obviously it's not necessary. And then finally, we're seeing two of the worst offenders are typically the passing the buck. It's not my problem, or they're awaiting the worst offenders. I'm bad, but these people are worse, so I'll wait for them to get to my level before I try. But the thing is, we have a framework we can measure. We have 17 goals. We have these goals which have targets. These targets have indicators. So we have a ready-made global framework that we can use to measure. We can use to prove our actions. So as part of my work, I've actually helped develop industry guidelines, which is helping to lead the horse to water. This industry publication was on behalf of the United Fresh, the pan produce industry body in New Zealand, and we actually linked it to the government indicators of Aotearoa New Zealand, which were released by the New Zealand government in 2019. So this is not just the industry going off and doing its own thing, but linking into a New Zealand network developed by the government that links into the global framework of the United Nations. So there are systems out there that you can link into, that you can develop, that build on what has already been done. And documents such as this can help explain how you can connect the SDG targets into implementable actions. So we have systems that tell in the back of the document, assistants, they'll help you tell you this is how you can implement it in your work for all 17 goals. But you'll notice here, I'm talking about a guideline. It's a guideline, but it does not measure. Measurement requires something else. So for measurement, we have the industry publication Fresh Facts, which I'm also working on. And this is data focused. It's tracking, verifying data. It's aimed at supporting the what and how. And the reason for this is because aligned and accurate data is essential to actually being able to prove or measure things. If you're measuring something, but I'm not measuring it the same way, we can't compare, we can't collate the data, we can't do anything with that data. It's just two sets of useless information. Now, we've been working across systems from 2023 to 2025. So in 2023, we had one page specifically just for the SDGs. In 2024, we've got 2 pages, and we continue to expand it into 2025 and with further expansion in 2026 with additional data on Māori, on the land, on resource management. So this will continue. And I would have brought some of the 2025 one, but unfortunately, publication's not for another 2 weeks. However, if you come see me after this, I have an entire bag of swag of the 2024 versions which show you how you can look at measuring and monitoring measurements. Now, looking at the SDGs themselves, the guidelines from the United Fresh are now 3 years old, and the SDGs themselves have been out for 11 years. So it should be easy to be able to prove. But what we're finding is that a high percentage of the industry is actually claiming sustainability action, with 90 to 95% of the industry mentioning sustainability in their annual reports. However, only less than 1 in 5 are actually mentioning the SDGs or tracking the SDGs, and only 1 in 6 to 1 in 7 are actually adopting a framework related to the SDGs. So while lots are mentioning it, very few are actually even taking steps towards doing anything in a way that is measurable or provable. So the walk is not occurring, but the talk definitely is. So that comes to, well, how do you actually assess and measure and prove? Well, we can measure with assessments and other tools. They're all out there. This is one particular one we've just recently been developing for our clients, looking at, hey, how do you actually assess your business in a manner specific to your business? Because the reality is your unsubstantiated data, your unsubstantiated claims, they're propaganda. They're not actually sustainable. The data-backed results are what help support your governance or what helps support your appropriate legal actions. So in summary, what we've found is that there's an over-reliance on others to make things better. You need data. It's a priority to walk the talk. Frameworks are important, but the measurement is even more important. Your actions need to actually start matching your words, and we, everyone needs to start actually assessing your sustainability in a concise manner that is actually data-backed. And then finally, you can assess yourself in a New Zealand manner. You don't need to actually go overseas to find things when there are New Zealanders and New Zealand frameworks that can work for you in the New Zealand context. So walk the talk, don't just talk the talk.
Thanks so much, Jacob. Really inspiring. And he's our data man, it seems. And definitely don't forget to come and see Jacob for some of the materials he's brought with him. They're pretty cool what they're doing through the AgriChain Centre. And that's influencing so much of the fresh produce industry in New Zealand. Isn't it everything except the meat producers and viticulture?
All horticulture, so your fresh fruit, your veggies, your herbs, your growing plants from the nurseries, your mushrooms.
Yeah, so really awesome to see integration of more sustainability and not just the talk of it. And next up, we've got Aotearoa, so I'm very pleased to have presenting to you. And she's recently changed employers, so her affiliation's changed. She can explain that, but she'll be talking about some really cool work that she's helped to implement when working with lottery grants. So please, warm welcome for Aya.
Kia ora koutou, ko Aotearoa aho, no te hiku o te ika a Maui aho. So I come from the far north of Aotearoa, and I'll be talking to you today about the Lottery Outcomes Framework and Composite Index, recently developed by our team at the Department of Internal Affairs, Te Taritai Whenua. But first, a little bit about me. So in 2022, I had the opportunity to travel from Aotearoa to New York City, thanks to a Fulbright Science and Innovation Graduate Award from Fulbright New Zealand. And I did this during my time studying the Master of Sustainable Development Goals and completed my research practicum while I was in New York, based at the Columbia Climate School, where I also had the opportunity to visit the United Nations headquarters in real life. So my research at Columbia Climate School focused on climate resilience for coastal communities, and if you're interested, you can find the publications in my LinkedIn profile or just have a Google. They're all open access, and this is not what I'm talking about today, so I'll go back to the Lottery Outcomes Framework. When we set out on the journey to develop the Lottery Outcomes Framework, we took inspiration from a well-known whakatauaki from Rangi Metikingi of Wanganui. Ko te paitawhiti, waia kia tata, ko te paitata, whakamaua kia tina. Seek out the distant horizons while cherishing those achievements at hand. And so we named our 3 levels of outcomes in the outcomes framework after these horizons. Ngā paitawhiti are the far horizon outcomes, ngā paitata are the mid-horizon outcomes, and ngā paipoto are the near horizon outcomes. So the New Zealand Lottery Grants Board, Te Puna Tahua, distributes the profits made from New Zealand's state lotteries for the benefit of New Zealand communities. So the purposes for which lottery profits may be distributed are set out in the Gambling Act 2003. And if you're interested in applying for lottery grants, you can find more information on the Community Matters website. So the outcomes framework is drawn from these community purposes and sets out the 3 far horizon outcomes, ngā paitawhiti, which are social cohesion, community wellbeing, and collective self-determination, and 9 mid-horizon outcomes, ngā paitata, which each break down into many more specific outcomes, ngā paipoto, which are not shown on this diagram. So I won't go into a lot of detail about all of these outcomes today, but I'll be talking a bit about the ones that relate to the theme for the summit, which is about Goal 12, responsible consumption and production. So as you can imagine, the environmental wellbeing outcome is the area of the framework that includes the most sustainability-focused outcomes, but we've sort of sprinkled them through the whole framework. So the Māori goal, Māori will design and develop initiatives as defined by and for Māori, talks about being guided by Ranginui and Papatuanuku in decision-making. And there are a number of other goals throughout all areas of the framework that relate to sustainability. So when lottery grant decision makers, the lottery distribution committees and the members of the Lottery Grants Board are deciding whether to award a lottery grant, we've developed the Kunai model to guide lottery grant system prioritisation. So this uses the metaphor of kunai, or woven baskets used to gather shellfish, to demonstrate the way that a series of filters can be applied to guide lottery grant decisions. So lottery grants must be for community purposes, they must support equity, te tiriti or waitangi, and support the groups named in the Gambling Act. They must align to the board's strategy, vision and guiding legislation, consider the priorities set by the board, and consider the priorities set by lottery distribution committees. There are several groups named in the Gambling Act, and each lottery committee can choose particular whenua or strands when deciding how to weave a konai for their committee. So they can choose which outcomes and which of the groups named in the Act to prioritise. So the Gambling Act says that lottery committees must have regard to the needs of Māori, and must, as appropriate, also have regard to the needs of older people, Pacific people and other ethnic communities, women, youth and people with disabilities. We've included one additional category, which is people experiencing barriers to participation. And this is because the Act talks about reducing or overcoming barriers to social, recreational, civil or cultural participation. And that aligns quite nicely with the Agenda 2030 goal of no one left behind. I just want to give a shout out to my friend Pedram, who's sitting up the back here. He wrote a paper about the Sustainable Development Goals during his time at Te Tari Tai Whenua, and we're still thinking about that today. So the Lottery Grants Board have chosen to prioritise 3 of the mid-horizon outcomes, ngā pai tata, and one of these is environmental well-being, which focuses on climate action and environmental sustainability. So when we think about how the Lottery Outcomes Framework aligns with the Sustainable Development Goals, Goal 12, Responsible Consumption and Production, and Goal 7, Affordable and Clean Energy, are represented within the economic well-being area of the Outcomes Framework, which includes a goal about using alternative economic models to promote sustainable consumption and production, like donut economics, degrowth, or the circular economy. And then there's another outcome about supporting economic needs sustainably with natural resources. And we tend to see a lot of clean energy projects coming in for lottery funding, for instance, installing solar panels for marae or other community facilities. The Outcomes Framework also has a whole section about environmental well-being that aligns to many of these areas, such as Goal 6, Clean Water and Sanitation, Goal 11, Sustainable Cities and Communities, Goal 14, Life Below Water, and Goal 15, Life on Land. So we see these in outcomes such as protecting the ecosystem and sustainable access to clean air, clean water and food sources, and progressing locally led sustainability initiatives. I've also given climate action a slide of its own. This one falls within the environmental well-being of the Outcomes Framework and includes outcomes relating to progressing locally led action on climate change mitigation and adaptation, while there are also outcomes relating to emergency preparedness in the capability, capacity and self-reliance area of the framework. So when I did the Master of Sustainable Development Goals, climate action wasn't yet available as a specialisation. I did environmental sustainability, but Regina has just mentioned that I'm about to leave Te Tari Tai Whenua to take up a climate role in local government. So looking forward to getting more climate action in my life. So just before I run out of time, because Regina's just held up the 2 minutes poster for me, I want to touch on the development of the new lottery dashboards. So data is really important. And these dashboards have been designed to help inform lottery decision makers about localised community needs and the potential community impacts of lottery grants so that funding can be directed to where it's most needed. And we currently have an active research project using the Integrated Data Infrastructure, or IDI, which is managed by Stats NZ. So this is a big data warehouse which allows researchers to access administrative data alongside census data, and we've used this data to develop a composite index to guide lottery decisions. So for anyone who's thinking, what is a composite index? It's a tool which combines multiple individual indicators to give an overall score to help simplify things for busy decision makers. So the New Zealand Deprivation Index is an example of a composite index and has traditionally been used to inform lottery decisions, But we've got census changes coming up, so we're making the move to more administrative data. Cool. Ngā mihi. Thank you, everybody.
Brilliant, Aya. Thank you so much. And remember to put questions, please, via the app, because we probably will have a few minutes for those after our next speaker. So the last one of the Young Minds speakers coming to us is Kararaina Tepuni, and please welcome her. And she's going to be speaking, drawing on her experiences as a PhD student at Te Herenga Waka, Victoria University, bringing mātauranga Māori and science and sustainability together. Looking forward to it.
Kia ora. Tēnā koutou katoa, ko Kararaina Tepuni tōku ingoa, huhuri ahau, no Rangitāne o Manawatu, ngā te raukaua ki te tonga, ngā te parau, me ngā te rangi hoki. I'm a PhD student based in Te Whanganui Atara, and I'm studying through Victoria University and ESNZ, or as you guys may know, NIWA formally. I come into this mahi as a scientist, a mokopuna, and a kaitiaki. My work sits at the intersection of environmental science and kaupapa Māori, and it's driven by a deep commitment to collective well-being. Sustainability for me isn't just about climate targets or carbon budgets. It's about relationships with our whenua, our communities, and the generations that will follow. It's about how we live, how we lead, and how we listen to the world around us. My research explores how our Indigenous forests help remove carbon from the atmosphere, a process called carbon sequestration. It's one of nature's silent superpowers in a fight against climate change. I use a gas called carbonyl sulfide, or COS, to trace how much carbon is being taken up by the forest. COS behaves a lot like carbon dioxide, or CO2, during photosynthesis, but unlike CO2, it's not re-released into the atmosphere. This makes COS a powerful tool for understanding how much carbon has been locked away in our ngahere. I combine field measurements, computer modelling, and satellite data to build a clearer picture of how these forests function. It's a bit like trying to hear the forest breathe, softly across ridgelines and valleys. This work helps us understand the role of native forests in climate resilience and how we can better protect them. So fieldwork is a big part of my mahi. I travel from Wellington to the east coast, often stopping for a paua pai on Highway 35. Catching up with the cousins in Ruatoria and pulling weeds at the whānau urupa. Then it's on high-vis overalls and trekking through the Raukumara forest with an 8-foot collection pole to gather air samples from the above canopy. It's not glamorous, but it's powerful. Our forests aren't just carbon sinks. They're living entities with whakapapa and mauri. They hold the stories of our past and the potential for our future. When we measure carbon uptake, we're not just collecting data, we're recognising the role the ngahere has in sustaining life. This is sustainability in practice, hands-on, grounded, and deeply relational. Outside of the lab, I'm Vice Chair of the Rangitāne o Manawatu Cultural Trust. We care for the cultural sites returned to our iwi post-settlement, and our mahi includes environmental planning, cultural monitoring, and restoring relationships with whenua and wai. Again, sustainability in action, guided by mātauranga Māori, grounded in whakapapa, and driven by collective responsibility. It's about protecting what matters, not just for us, but for those to come after us. And it's about recognising that Indigenous people and Indigenous leadership is essential to building resilient futures. One of my favourite parts of this mahi is working with rangatahi. We use storytelling, hands-on experiments, and kaupapa Māori learning to make science tangible. One of my favourite is trapping air around a houseplant to show how it breathes. We measure the carbon dioxide changes over time. One student asked if I could bottle forest air and sell it, and I said, honestly, if I could, I'd be funding half the climate budget by now. But science communication isn't just about facts. It's about connection. It's about making knowledge feel relevant, empowering, and ours. Sorry. At the end of the day, sustainability is all about collective futures. The future isn't something that we wait for. As my fellow panelists have said, it's something that we build together with aroha, with science, and with story. It's about using all our mātauranga and pukenga that we have access to build better futures. Nō reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā anō tātou katoa.
Oh, wow. Thanks so much, Kararaina. What a nice finish to the Young Minds session. Really wrapping it up, bringing it back to the people. You might have thought we've got a scientist coming on board. What's your PhD in? Which department?
It's really nerdy. I'm in atmospheric science.
Great, in atmospheric science. But we heard all about the social, the cultural, the people, what matters and why we're doing this. And, I love those frameworks that talk about that anything that happens in the economy and in society should be within those environmental boundaries. We need to find ways of working in cooperation with nature, not against it. So thanks so much for that. It's time for questions, and I was just desperately trying to work out how I was seeing the questions because I was struggling with it after giving Glenn a slightly hard time last time around with that. Are they on individual people's ones? Otherwise, I might ask someone if they would like to start by asking a question. We have 5 minutes for questions, and then you're going to you're choosing a concurrent session to go to. So did anyone? Okay, we've got a couple of questions, and I can't remember if we have a roving mic. No.
Kia ora koutou, ngā mihi nui kia koutou. Her pātai for all of you. As older practitioners, what's a useful thing that we can do?
Okay. So anyone, you get it? As older practitioners, what's a useful thing that we can do to support you? Anyone want to?
Help with mentorship and leadership and the growth of the young people into the positions that can allow them the power to change.
I guess from my experiences, a lot of it's to do with networking and introducing people and like making those kind of transdisciplinary connections. Sustainability goals aren't going to be solved with one particular science. There's going to be a lot of aspects that feed into that. So being prepared to assist with young members and making those connections, being present in those networks, and so it doesn't take them 30, 50 years to actually finally get to the top of those or make those connections with people, and just support the change. I mean, we're in an ever-changing climate, an ever-changing world, and the solutions for the future are probably not obvious to us right now, but they will be obvious to us in 5 years' time. So just being ready to support that change.
And for me, I talked about a little bit being a new sustainability professional and feeling like change is not happening. And I think, people who've been on this kaupapa for a while, you're aware of the change that's happened and actually the huge amount of ground that we've covered. And I think for people like myself, that's really important to be reminded of that. And change does happen, and it is happening. And actually, we have come a long way. Because I think as a newcomer in this space, sometimes it can seem a little bit daunting what we have to do. So being reminded of that, I think, is really helpful.
Great. Thanks. I did see another question over here. Another hand raised.
Kia ora. My question was originally for Jacob, but I'm trying to expand it. I've heard that there's a huge opportunity for second harvest and gleaning type of crops that are grown but don't get harvested or eaten. And I'm just wondering, can we use SDGs as a lever for more change here? And I suppose to open up to everyone too, kind of are SDGs a good they're a common framework. Are there ways we can more effectively, whether we're not-for-profits, academics, whatever, use them as a means of working in with bigger organisations to effect more change? And how do we do that?
This one? Yep. This one's working. Yep. Yeah, so gleaning-wise, sort of depends on the country. Gleaning is not too useful a technique in what developed countries where you have highly processed systems because the tools tend to pick up. What's actually more useful particularly is reducing food loss and food waste through the supply chain, which is reducing the amount of food which is contaminated by chemicals or bacteria, and reducing the amount of food that is damaged in the supply chain by birds, insects, or the actual mechanical damage, and we're seeing in underdeveloped countries up to 30 to 40% of food is actually being lost through the supply chain from after the harvest. So it's not so much the problem of getting it harvested or gleaning it off the field once the harvest has occurred, but actually the losses through the supply chain from time, from bacteria, from chemical contamination, from just general rot, or just not reaching the end of the supply chain. In general, for the SDG framework, it doesn't really matter what framework you choose, so long as you commit to it. And as I pointed out, use data, because otherwise you're just talking. So choose something, stick with it, figure out how to measure it, and use the SMART system. Make sure that you've got something specific. Make sure that you've got something measurable. Make sure you've got something that is actually achievable. Make sure it's realistic. Make sure it's time bound.
I guess just to touch on using the SDGs framework to kind of build that partnership between like what's happening in communities and corporations. There's lots that is already happening, whether it's acknowledged or not, that's contributing to measurements and applicable data for tracking of the SDGs. And so I think it's a really good leverage point to build on those partnerships. And to grow from there and to be able to share across from what's already happening and to shift away from business as usual.
That's awesome. And it's probably all that we've got time for. So could we please do another round of applause? And yeah, great. All very sustainable gifts to our panelists. And also a quick announcement about if you had trouble with the app, because the code on the back isn't quite right. It should be SDG 25, not SDG 2025. So if you had any trouble with that, just ask at registration and they'll fix you up as well. You now have a choice of sessions to go to, so check them out. I know the hardest thing about this next hour is which one to choose. I know I'd like to be in all four, but please make your way to the rooms. By the way, SSLB 5, 6 and 7 are upstairs. So if you're going to one of those rooms, feel free to just go up the stairs and out to the left. And actually one of the students can guide you where you're going out there. But otherwise, if you're going to SSLB 3 or 4, you're downstairs. Just come out downstairs, okay?